The story begins with a bunch of feathers falling from a red sky that looked like it was on fire. Then a really bizarre crow appears, eating something right in the middle of all that mess. The camera shows a completely wrecked room, with a lot of people down and scattered across the floor. And at that moment, someone ends up stepping in a puddle of a really weird liquid on the ground. The boy in the collar gets scared and wonders what exactly had happened to him. Then he looks at everything around him and freezes, seeing the complete destruction of that place. The young man in the middle of the street wonders if he was the one who caused all of this, swearing he didn't want it. Completely desperate, the protagonist questions why things ended up this way. At that moment, the collar around his neck starts to give off a very strong glow. A red energy symbol appears behind him, and shadows try to grab the boy any way they can. Suddenly, the boy wakes up terrified in his bed after having this nightmare. With that, the young man sits on the edge of the bed, out of breath, trying to calm down a little. He touches the collar on his neck and notices he had the same bad dream yet again. The protagonist is isolated in a cell when the system announces that an instructor has just arrived. The robot voice tells him to get ready for a very serious conversation immediately. The door opens and a guy walks in, warning that they usually get rid of potential threats. And with the visitor at the glass, he says that not everyone there has patience for this situation. The guy with glasses smiles and says that cooperating will avoid a lot of trouble in the future. Very confused, the boy can only repeat the word about having a certain special ability. He gets upset, remembering he was taken and locked up without even knowing about his own power. But the instructor says the tests don't make mistakes, and he has a very dangerous force inside him. The man then sits down and says he spent the last few days looking into the young man's past. He found out that at the orphanage, the boy would wrap himself in paper and was called a monster by the others. And besides that, the boy loved to go into the computer room just so he could play games in secret. Adjusting his glasses, the visitor asks if these bizarre stories are actually true. And then the man questions if the protagonist finally wants to know what his special ability is. The trapped boy stands up desperately and demands to be let out of that place so they can talk. At this, the visitor gets close to the glass, maintaining a very cold and super calculating face now. He reveals that the tests show a huge power to manipulate reality through games. The boy hears that this energy can create a sort of stage to teach him how to use this force. Very angrily, the boy asks if the man is a robot made just to talk to himself. The instructor takes a deep breath and decides to end the chat, since the boy doesn't understand his situation. The guy in the suit turns to leave, while the boy desperately asks him to wait. Gritting his teeth, he says he knows very well that he's been trapped in that place for a whole month. Putting his hand on the glass, the protagonist demands to know when he'll finally be able to leave. Stopping in his tracks, the guy says that if he's a good boy, he might have a chance to get out. Then the heavy door closes and the voice announces that he only leaves when he becomes an adult. Alone in the dark room, the young man realizes he will probably never leave that place alive. Full of rage, he punches the glass hard, saying he'll just become a lifeless shell. At that, the wall cracks and releases a bright light, and a message calling him a player appears. The place around him completely shatters, forming several shiny little pieces floating in the air. And with the shock, the boy ends up falling backward into a very weird digital space. Floating in the middle of an all-blue place, he wonders where on earth he's ended up this time. Standing up on the virtual floor, he remembers that guy talking about being able to create games. Stepping on the line of light, the shocked boy wonders if this is his own ability. A floating screen appears in the air and announces that the infinite game has been successfully loaded. A huge structure of light appears, announcing that the character creation phase has just begun. At this moment, several digital blocks start flying very fast all over that dark space. A really cool character profile appears, showing his basic stats and also his class. Reading the text on the screen, the boy discovers that this avatar controls some very dark shackles, and with a gesture, he pushes the screen away and notices the character's family hid dangerous secrets. A second profile soon appears, showing a young adventurer with stats focused on exploring places. The magical system asks him to choose one of the two avatars to use in the real world. With a very confident smile, our protagonist makes his big choice inside this game. He chooses the first character, and the game soon asks him to define his moral path. The young man chooses the most neutral path, and the system begins to create this new character for him. He notices that the map copies reality and plans to use the avatar to find who took him. And with a very determined look, he knows that this incredible ability will be the key to escape. Being an anti-hero, he'll have more advantages on the street, and then the countdown begins. Finally, a strong beam of light cuts through the darkness, marking the start of his awesome new journey. At that, a shining trail cuts through space, marking the beginning of his transfer to another place. The protagonist slowly opens his eyes and wonders if that's the sunlight on his face. In a brightly lit classroom, the students celebrate the long-awaited arrival of summer vacation. Very confused, the young man looks around, trying to understand what place he had ended up in. Without wasting any time, he quickly opens the classroom door, wanting to get out of there as fast as possible. Standing at the door, the boy freezes while observing the scenery and trying to process it all. Then he sees the schoolyard and realizes with excitement that he can finally see the outside. Looking at the giant city under the orange sky, the young man wonders if he really managed to escape. That whole wonderful view of the city under the sunlight leaves our hero completely speechless. He remains paralyzed on the balcony, certain that he has finally escaped that nightmare. But he gets a huge scare right at that moment when someone suddenly puts a hand on his shoulder. A very cheerful friend appears, hugging him and inviting our hero to his house later. Then the magic panel announces it will load the memories, and the boy feels a very strong pain. Beams of magic light go straight into his eye and transfer a bunch of data to his mind. Seeing the boy suffer a bit, his classmate's expression quickly changes, and he worriedly asks if he's okay. Out of breath, he tries to calm down while the panel confirms that all memories have been downloaded. Wanting to play it cool, he smiles calmly and says he just felt a slight headache. Holding the strap of his backpack tightly, he says he's busy and will have to visit later. With that, the protagonist waves, turns his back, and leaves, leaving his very confused friend behind. Showing the front of the school, we see his classmate shouting from a distance to try and find out where he's going. Without answering, the boy just hurries down the school stairs, ignoring everything around him. Arriving on a rooftop alone, he opens the iron door and simply throws his backpack on the ground. Running free under the open sky, he celebrates, feeling the wind on his face and confirming that it's real. Stopping to catch his breath, the boy gets more serious, analyzing the city around him better. Then he takes a firm step forward, hearing the sound of his sneaker hitting the ground. Looking down from up high, he's curious, realizing he used his new powers to invade the capital. Seeing some lines and magic butterflies, he concludes that his ability can change the whole world. With a big, confident smile, the young man feels relieved to finally be in control, and with a very sinister look, he understands why the lab wanted to lock up his original body. Walking on the edge of the building, he starts to access his new avatar's memories to test them out. Completely fearless, the protagonist simply lets himself fall backward from the top of that building. As he falls through the air, a dark energy goo starts coming out of his jacket sleeves. His eyes start to glow a very strong red, showing that the boy has activated his magic. Very aggressively, several dark tentacles explode from his body, showing his power. The young man balances in the air, surrounded by these dark energy bands that seem to be alive. He raises his hand, analyzing all that power running through his fingers, thinking the magic is incredible. And in a very agile move, he shoots one of these dark tentacles toward a wall. Using this shadow magic like a vine, he starts swinging through the city. The dark goo hits the brick wall hard and clings on tightly, supporting his weight. Hanging from this strange web, he flies past buildings and enjoys the freedom of the moment. As he cuts through the city sky, people walking on the street notice a blur passing by up above. A young man holding a phone and a girl look up, confused, wondering what they saw. But up high, the boy just laughs, jumping freely between buildings and praising this power of his. With a big grin, he notices that this magic looks a lot like a mix of some comic book heroes. Full of adrenaline, he continues diving through the air using this strange, dark, and purple energy. After traveling for a while, he arrives at his first destination and stops in front of a large house. Balanced on his own shadows, the boy confirms that this is indeed the orphanage where he grew up. At that, he remembers the lonely nights he spent in the attic, just imagining what the outside would be like. Back in the real world, his face becomes blank as he thinks about everything that place caused. At this moment, his magical energies dissolve in the wind, looking like several black birds. Soon after, he walks down the quiet street and arrives at what would be his avatar's original house. Retrieving the data from his mind, he discovers that the original family consisted of parents and siblings, but the boy remembers that a cruel tragedy happened years before when his mother's life was taken. Suffering greatly from the loss, the avatar's own father abandoned the family and disappeared into the world. Lightly holding the doorknob, he concludes that he'll only have to deal with the younger sister and the older brother, but before opening it, he ends up freezing, feeling that something strange was going on. Then he notices a glowing gear-like figure on the doorknob and wonders what it is. As he gets closer to look, a giant orange digital panel pops up in his face with many options. Reading all those words, the protagonist deduces that this thing is the system's interface. Looking at the screen's options, he focuses on the quest section and gets curious to see how it works. Then the doorknob starts to turn, indicating that someone is about to enter the house. The door opens, and the young man looks back as a voice says they were already waiting for him. Then several quests appear on the screen, saying he needs to uncover his family's secrets. At that moment, his older brother named Gu Kai appears, holding a knife covered with a red substance. With that, the man comments that the boy arrived early and invites him to come inside the house right away. But the relative just smiles in a friendly way and says that dinner is already on the table. At this, the hero becomes suspicious upon noticing the sharp object covered with a red liquid. He wonders if his family member was really just cooking, or if something terrible happened there. Sitting at the table, the young man sees the feast, while the older brother asks where their sister is. Eating his rice, the protagonist remembers that the girl was going to sleep over at a friend's house tonight. Then the man says he's tired and decides to go up to his room, leaving the hero alone. At that, a new magic screen appears in front of him, showing the character's skill tree. The system announces that the menu has loaded and shows the development progress of each power. He analyzes the 3 options, which are focused on stealth attacks and also investigation. With 1 point left, the boy decides that a spying ability would be perfect for the moment. Suddenly, the news on TV interrupts the program to give an urgent report about the city. The image shows a masked hero called Blue Arc, who has just defeated a dangerous criminal. With that, the boy watches the information carefully, trying to understand more about this world of heroes. The screen explains that those who use powers are called espers, and that one is one of the best there is. He wonders if the organization that took him in the past has any connection to this group. At that moment, the protagonist decides he can't waste time and resolves to activate his new magic, and with that, he spends his point and learns the perception skill, which releases a purple glow. The young man feels his mind expanding, and now he can see the layout of every room in that house. Using only his thoughts, he realizes he can spy on any place he wants at that moment. Suddenly, the system gives out several quest rewards like stat points and skill points. The menu explains that the division points are for creating new characters for him to use in real life. At this, he is shocked to understand that he will be able to control several different avatars at the same time. The hero hears a voice from a radio announcing a new urgent mission involving criminals. He then realizes that the sound of that conversation is coming directly from his older brother's room. Looking through the wall, the young man sees his relative sitting in front of a computer in the office. The man complains that he is very tired and shows his injured arm after today's battle. The voice on the radio says a villain has taken hostages and is demanding his immediate presence on site. Annoyed, the man puts a communication device in his ear to prepare for the job. At that moment, a technological armor begins to appear around his body, emitting blue lights. The hero Blue Arc reveals his full form, showing that he is actually the protagonist's brother. With a smile, the boy realizes he has finally discovered the big secret his relative was hiding. The communication reports that the hostages are in danger, and he needs to hurry to save the group's image. The masked warrior stands up from his chair, ready to spring into action, even though he's badly injured. And in a flash of blue energy, the man disappears from the room, leaving only a trail of light behind. With that, the hero flies at high speed through the city, trying to reach his destination as soon as possible. The young man is impressed by such speed and recognizes the talent his relative truly has. The scene changes to the central square, where the police have surrounded the entire building, waiting for more backup. The reporters and police officers are tense, wondering if the city's savior will arrive in time. On top of the building, we see a child crying desperately while being held by the bad guys. Several armed men hold people captive at gunpoint in an atmosphere of pure terror. The villain Green Wing appears with his green wings and announces he will eliminate the first hostage soon. With a wicked look, the monster begins the countdown to carry out his terrible threat. He floats over the city, continuing the count while observing the desperation of the people below. At that exact moment, a trail of blue light cuts through the sky, and the hero finally appears for the fight. The villain smiles upon seeing that the city's prince has finally arrived for the main event of the night. The masked man says this villain talk is cliché and asks what the monster really wants. The creature demands that he surrender immediately in exchange for the lives of innocent people. But the warrior points his finger, saying he prefers to save everyone and lock up the criminal right away. At that, the monster reveals that he has scattered partners with detonators in the crowd below. He mocks him, saying that a few losses wouldn't be a big deal for someone as experienced as the hero. At this, the masked young man gets tense, as he knows his body is at its limit after the last fight. One of the hostages screams desperately, begging the savior not to surrender to that cruel monster. Annoyed by the interruption, the villain tells the girl to shut up in a very aggressive way. The young woman freezes in fear, realizing that the situation is spiraling out of control with every second. Out of patience, the monster orders his men to fire, marking the beginning of a total tragedy. But the hero tries to prevent the tragedy, shouting for everyone to stop it immediately. With this, the henchmen get completely confused, while the villain watches everything from up high. Then a soldier's weapon falls to the ground, indicating that something strange has started to happen. Suddenly, dark tentacles appear out of nowhere, grabbing the neck of one of the shooters. At this moment, both the city's savior and the monster are shocked by the interference. But the shadows continue their attack, lifting all the bad guys away from the hostages. Then one of the victims looks up, not understanding who owns that mysterious force. With that, our protagonist appears, hanging upside down in the middle of the darkness. He flashes a very confident smile from behind his mask, enjoying the impact of his arrival. The hero Blue Arc asks if the newcomer is an ally, but soon realizes he doesn't know him from anywhere. At that, the villain threatens to blow everything up at once if that stranger doesn't back off right now. But the system announces that the young man has activated social superstar mode to earn points. He starts reading his socialization guide, deciding he will try to cooperate with the group there. While the monster yells, annoyed, the boy just ignores the threats, focused on his reading. He then discovers that the first step is to act like the other person to create a real connection. So the masked man tells the villain to calm down and challenges him to detonate the devices if he has the guts. With a quick movement, he closes the book, showing that he's not the least bit worried about it. The protagonist explains that if the victims are harmed, the bad guy will lose his only advantage there. But the monster becomes possessed with rage, and swears he will end the life of this cheeky intruder. At that moment, the young man reads the second step, which is basically to satisfy the other's desires. With that, he snaps his fingers, ready to do what the villain had asked for at the very beginning. Then, the dark energy squeezes the neck of one of the captured henchmen even tighter. At that, a red glow takes over the scene, indicating that the situation got really heavy there. The winged bad guy's eyes widen as he realizes that this boy is completely unpredictable. An explosion of dark energy happens on the spot, leaving a sinister trail through the square's air. The protagonist speaks calmly, saying he just let the soldiers go, just as the villain had ordered. But he holds a macabre, shadow-filled trophy while asking why the villain is mad. At that, the shooter's body falls lifelessly to the ground, revealing the extreme coldness of this new player. The hero Blue Arc watches the scene, paralyzed, unable to believe what just happened right there. Consumed by pure hatred, the monster curses the young man, promising a very painful revenge for him. But the boy realizes that maybe he went a little too far with his performance this time. So he decides that villains are hard to deal with and resolves to focus on the heroes from now on. At that, the shadows begin to spread, making the victims even more afraid of everything. The woman cries desperately upon noticing the level of violence that stranger just used. With that, several henchmen are scattered on the ground, while the magical energies float in the air. The protagonist says it's the next one's turn and wonders if he looks like a hero of justice now. But the people's screams of terror indicate that they don't see him as a kind savior. The system sends an alert that he is deviating too much from the neutral character role. At that, the young man wonders if he should try to fix the mess to calm down the hostages. He uses his dark chains to lift the defeated enemies in an attempt to make amends. And in a gesture, the boy ensures that now everything looks new and perfect, as if nothing had happened. But the look of horror on people's faces shows that his plan only made the overall situation worse. Then the magic screen warns that the conduct deviation has risen sharply and could cause a power surge. Trying to play it cool, he tells the child that it was all just special effects. At that, he roughly lets go of the last bad guy while trying to maintain his disguise there. But the little girl stares at the scene with wide eyes, unable to say a word. Tears fall from her face as the trauma of that night seems to be forever etched in her memory. The hero feels frustrated seeing that his attempt to socialize was a complete disaster, so he tries to explain himself, saying it was just an accident and that he's very nervous now. Suddenly, the warrior Blue Arc advances and grabs the protagonist's arm very firmly. With sparks of blue energy, the man demands to know the true identity of this mysterious being. The young man replies that he is just a neutral character who doesn't want to be defined by anyone, but he says with certainty that the two of them will be great friends in the very near future. The blue masked man accuses him of being a life taker for having eliminated those criminals without any mercy. To this, the protagonist retorts by asking if he would have preferred the victims to have perished instead. The hero talks about the laws, but the boy says those are just words for the cameras. Then he invites his relative for a private conversation while releasing a purple power aura. The young man points his fingers, ready to force the other to say what he really thinks about everything. With that, a dimensional rift opens behind him, sucking all the light from that dark environment. But the technological warrior charges his electric attack, ready for the final fight between the two. With that, the young man asks if the blue hero is willing to participate in an important meeting. At this, the masked man's feet touch the ground as he prepares to leave the battle site. The boy jumps from the building surrounded by purple flames, showing total confidence in his movements. At this moment, the technological warrior walks across the rooftop, analyzing the hostage's situation. He holds a piece of dark energy, feeling that this power is different from anything he has ever seen. Observing the small dark sphere, the savior realizes that the stranger's strength is very mysterious. But the winged villain shouts from up high, complaining about being ignored by the two fighters. With that, Blue Arc informs him that the criminal's partners have already been caught and the detonators don't work. The monster is shocked to realize that his plan has failed, and he is now surrounded by the association. He then looks down, worried about his escape, while noticing the presence of other powerful figures. A blonde ally appears with her arms crossed, showing that the area is already under the good guys' control. The main hero is confused, noticing that something unexpected happened to the prisoners nearby. Then, the villain takes a closer look and panics. When he sees the state of his own henchmen, consumed by rage, the monster stares at the scene, feeling he has been humiliated by that rookie kid. He lets out a cry of rage, cursing everyone before trying to disappear from that wretched place. A minute later, we see a trail of blue electricity cutting across the asphalt at high speed. The warrior runs across the rooftops, using his armor to track where the intruder is. Stopping in an isolated place, the hero orders the mysterious boy to come out of the shadows. Suddenly, a dark figure begins to materialize among the trees in a very sinister way. Hinging upside down, the protagonist greets his relative in a very ironic tone of voice. The hero asks who he really is and what the objective is behind so much senseless violence. Walking calmly, the young man says he has no name, but knows he'll get several nicknames soon. With that, he shows an old newspaper, revealing that he is in the know about the association's secrets. The news talks about a tragedy from 5 years ago, where a mother lost her life due to the hero's mistake. The boy explains that the victim's father tried to sue the government, but everything was kept secret. Hearing that, Blue Ark is paralyzed, remembering he was only 13 when the disaster happened. The young man says he understands the anger against these registered heroes who abuse their own power. At this, he manipulates a purple energy, saying he knows the real reason his relative became an Esper. He crushes a red light, saying that the man seeks revenge against those who took his mother's life. Annoyed, the blue warrior clenches his fists and says that those words are just meaningless nonsense. But the protagonist offers to help his relative infiltrate the organization and find the real culprit. The plan is to carry out an incredible revenge against those who destroyed the hero's family in the past. In return, the boy says he will only need a small favor from his new partner in crime. Very suspicious, the man in armor asks what exactly the stranger wants to gain from all this. The young man decides to maintain the mystery, warning that the secret could bring a fatal disaster to the hero. Then the city's savior demands to know how that stranger managed to discover his identity. With a sinister smile, the boy approaches, saying that the explanation for that is very simple. He points to his head, saying that he can see anyone's face behind the masks. The hero says that's absurd and starts charging his electrical energy for a quick attack. Angrily, he asks if the young man really believes he can't be defeated in that fight. Suddenly, black tentacles block the blue warrior's advance, showing an impenetrable defense. An explosion of light illuminates the entire street as the two powers clash head-on. The protagonist warns his relative not to overdo it, as his injuries are still serious. He then disappears into a purple mist, saying goodbye to the hero and leaving a tense atmosphere in the air. Strong thunderclaps cut through the night sky as rain begins to fall heavily on the city. Blue Ark stands still in the storm, thinking about everything he just heard from that stranger. We see the red liquid running down the warrior's hands, showing that he really is at his limit. Moments later, the scene changes to the old district, where lightning illuminates the simpler houses. The young man walks on the wet sidewalk and steps in a puddle of water as he returns to his house. Sneaking in through the window, the boy sighs with relief for having completed his nightly mission. The system shows that the second phase of the main quest is still incomplete and requires effort. Leaving his equipment on the bed, he realizes that winning his brother's trust will be a challenge, but he celebrates having finished the initial investigation and receiving several reward points. Sitting in his room, the hero wonders what his fighter nickname will be back at the capital square. The interface reveals Gu Wenyu's profile, showing that his basic stats are still C level. He analyzes the strength and agility screens, realizing that the system works like a PC game. The boy decides to focus everything on speed to be able to attack first and avoid fatal damage in the future. With that, the panel confirms the evolution of the agility stat, which immediately rises to C+ level. The young man touches the skill tree icon, ready to unlock incredible new powers. Finally, he enters a giant digital space, preparing to become even stronger in this world. At that, an explosion of yellow lightning cuts through the digital space, revealing the awakening of new powers. At this moment, the 3 skill options appear, divided between insane, cruel, and stealth modes. The young man analyzes that he can force others to tell the truth or steal data with just a touch. With this, he notices that the insane path only serves to increase his raw combat power, so he spends his point on the cruel option and learns the probing technique to read opponents. The screen then announces that he can now learn suppression to nullify any enemy's magic. Curious, the boy wonders what the limit of this power would be if just tying someone's foot would be enough. With a very sinister look, he plans to find some unlucky guy to test these game rules. The protagonist focuses his red eyes while processing every detail of his constant evolution. Then the option to create a new game character to act out in the physical world again appears. The notice explains that 3 division points are needed, and he currently only has 1 saved. He then realizes that with more characters, he can invade the orphanage, always having a safe backup. Returning to the avatar's reality, the young man sits on the edge of the bed, thinking about his next step. Suddenly, he feels a strange presence and becomes on high alert upon noticing something moving nearby. With that, a metallic hand charged with blue electricity slowly touches the doorknob. The older brother enters the room, still wearing his technological armor, and gives the boy a serious look. At that, the hero's eyes glow from behind the visor, showing that he is suspicious of something. But suddenly, the protagonist truly wakes up in his cell, realizing it was all a projection. The prison system announces that an instructor has arrived for a new interrogation immediately. With his hand on the glass, the visitor asks if the prisoner wants to know about the heroes of the outside world. The man in the white lab coat approaches, maintaining his usual air of superiority and mystery. Lying on the bed, the young man watches the instructor without showing any reaction, so as not to give away his plans. He then pretends that he just woke up, maintaining a very sleepy expression to deceive the enemy. Scratching his head, the boy greets the visitor, commenting that it must be late at night outside. The instructor smiles strangely, noticing the prisoner's good mood before asking a question. With a very sharp look, the man wants to know how the boy found out it was already night at that moment. The protagonist keeps his cool and faces the visitor without letting nervousness take over his face. At that, the guy in the suit gives a smirk, looking like he has already discovered one of our hero's lies. Apologizing for the question, the instructor puts his hand in his pocket to get something very important. Then he shows the photo of the dark avatar on his phone, asking if the boy knows that guy, and in an accusatory tone, the man questions if the prisoner is actually this new warrior of the shadows. The image reveals the character the young man used in the square, making the atmosphere in the cell much heavier. But the boy just jokes, saying he looks nothing like that ugly guy in the photograph. The instructor ignores the joke and explains that the association decided to give the newcomer a temporary code name. Adjusting his glasses, he reveals that the mysterious hero's name from now on is Black Chrysalis. With a simple gesture, the protagonist says he can take the insults and asks the reason for so much suspicion. At that, the man remembers the childhood incident where the boy wrapped himself up in toilet paper. The young man says that was just a stupid kid thing and asks why he is still locked up. With a very serious look, the instructor decides to tell the truth behind the boy's abduction. He reveals that there is a very frightening ancient prophecy involving our protagonist's destiny. The vision shows the planet being completely destroyed by a dark force coming directly from this young man. But the boy starts laughing, thinking the man has watched too many science fiction movies lately. The instructor doesn't find it funny and maintains the mystery, saying that no one can predict the future with certainty. Annoyed with the rumors, the boy demands to meet the person who spread this lie about him. The man shakes his head negatively, saying that it's impossible to arrange that meeting now. He explains that no one has ever seen this prophet's face, and his identity is the biggest secret of all. But this being's visions have always come true in the past, helping the government avoid several disasters. The protagonist realizes the instructor isn't kidding and becomes thoughtful about this destruction. Before leaving, the man announces that a person named Kong Yuling will arrive soon to visit him. Upon hearing this name, the young man jumps out of bed, showing an excitement he hadn't shown before. With that, the instructor leaves the premises to let the two of them talk alone, and without any interruptions. The boy looks at the ceiling, remembering that it's been a long time since he last saw this girl. Suddenly, the space begins to experience a digital glitch, indicating that a new connection has been initiated. A female silhouette appears in the middle of the blue glow, making our hero's heart race. The young woman appears through a magical hologram, revealing her sweet and very nostalgic appearance. The protagonist stares into the girl's eyes as memories from 3 years ago flood his mind. He remembers the first time they met at the orphanage on a sunny day that changed his life. The memory shows a pale little girl who was deaf and mute being introduced to the other orphans. Because of this, the other children didn't like her, as they were forced to learn sign language. At that, the hero realized she was just a very polite girl who didn't want to bother anyone. But the boy was different and stood in front of the girl to protect her from any threat. He was a wild child who loved to run through the corridors without fear of causing trouble. The young man then realized that, just like her, he was also seen as an outsider by everyone. Lying on the roof, the orphan says that his parents locked him in a closet and promised to come back soon. He admits he was very foolish to believe that lie and continued to isolate himself for years. With that, time passed and no one ever came to get him, leaving the little hero all alone in the world. As he grew up, he understood that he no longer needed them, but wished to have his friend always by his side. The girl listened to everything attentively, feeling the deep sadness her companion held in his heart. At that, a single tear runs down the young woman's face as she relates to her friend's pain. Suddenly, she touches the protagonist's shoulder, drawing his attention to something very important. The little girl shows her notebook with a sincere question, wanting to know if she can really trust him. At that moment, the boy felt for the first time the wonderful sensation of being useful to someone special. A slight smile appears on his face as he realizes he has finally found a purpose for his life. Under the light of the full moon, the young man promises that he will protect the girl with all his strength. Scared, he asks if she would also abandon him like his parents did in the cruel past. But the girl writes firmly that she would never leave her best friend alone, no matter what. Back in the present, the prisoner approaches the hologram and confirms that it is indeed his old friend. Crying with joy, the protagonist celebrates seeing that the young woman is well and safe in that place. The girl returns the look with great affection, showing that she also missed her protector very much. Then the boy tries to touch her, but blue sparks suddenly start coming out of the collar on his neck. Suddenly, the hero receives a very strong electric shock when trying to cross the glass barrier. He lets out a cry of agonizing pain as the electricity runs mercilessly through his entire body. The system warns that physical contact is forbidden, and the young man falls to the floor, completely dizzy from the shock. Desperate, the girl screams upon seeing her friend suffering, trying uselessly to help him through the panel. But the protagonist assures her that everything is fine and that he has gotten used to these severe punishments. Panting, he asks if the instructors sent her to question his body to get information. At that, the young woman shows the notebook, revealing that the order was to find out what his real ability was. The boy thinks she is very naive for asking that so directly in front of the guards. With that, he decides to lie, saying he has no powers to ensure the safety of both of them. The girl writes that she understood the message and accepts her friend's answer without questioning anything further. She lowers her head with a very sad expression, feeling the weight of the difficult situation between them. Then she shows one last message, saying she really misses her childhood companion. The young man looks with great determination, swearing in his mind that he will get his friend out of that place soon. At that moment, the instructor returns, announcing that the visiting time is over and orders them to take the girl away. The man says that if he behaves well, he can see her again and asks if he trusts them now. Sarcastically, the protagonist criticizes the fake kindness of someone who keeps an 11-year-old child locked up. The visitor comments that he sometimes forgets the boy is only 12 because of his mature mind. The prisoner then decides to ask a direct question to the man watching him through the glass. He questions why he hasn't been eliminated, since everyone believes he will destroy the world. The instructor looks at the young man seriously and asks if he really wants to hear the truth now. With a cold look, the boy demands that the man tell him everything he knows about his cruel fate. The visitor explains that taking out a dangerous esper could cause an uncontrollable power explosion. Relaxing on the bed, the boy ironically says that now he can sleep peacefully, knowing he's safe. But the instructor's gaze remains fixed on the young man, revealing that the surveillance on him will never stop. Then the man ends the conversation and leaves the place, leaving the prisoner alone with his thoughts. The boy focuses his vision on the ceiling, planning his next moves within that game simulation. The scene returns to the Avatar's world in the old district as the sun begins to set on the horizon. The system confirms that the player's consciousness has been successfully loaded into Character 1's body. A message announces that due to recent fame, the masked hero's codename has been updated by the game. His new official name is now Black Pupa, and he observes the city from a rooftop at night. The boy finds it interesting to have gotten a nickname in such a short time after the incident at the square. His main plan is to locate the secret laboratory to rescue his original body and his friend. Looking at the illuminated city, he knows he will need to be very careful not to be discovered. At that, he remembers the young woman's sweet smile and feels an even greater motivation to move forward. But a dark voice in his mind orders him to eliminate everyone who stands in his way back. The image focuses on the door of the house, where the protagonist is hiding at the current moment of the story. Suddenly, the doorknob starts to turn, indicating that someone from the family has just arrived home. The young man becomes fully alert, realizing he will need to act fast to avoid being caught by surprise. A female silhouette appears at the entrance, holding a tennis racket with a very mysterious air. Then the girl observes the room, noticing the presence of her brother, who should be resting there. With this, the young man is relieved that his reaction was fast enough not to be discovered. We then see the younger sister's feet walking around the room, wearing very cute animal slippers. The girl named Suzy eyes the hero suspiciously while holding a tennis racket. Then a new quest appears, asking the protagonist to investigate what his relative is hiding. At this moment, the girl raises her arm to deliver a precise blow to the bed where her brother was resting. And with the shock, the boy's eyes widen, realizing that the situation could get very complicated. But he raises his hands, asking the young woman to calm down, wanting to understand the reason for that aggression. She then complains that her brother is very lazy for sleeping until 3 in the afternoon like that. The system reveals that Zimai is 16 years old, and the character controlled by the hero seems to be the youngest. Scratching his head, the boy remembers the parents' rule, where the children have different last names. With that, the girl turns to leave the room, saying she doesn't want to stress over her relative anymore. He watches her leave, maintaining a very serious look as he tries to process the new information. Just then, the news on TV shows reports about the mysterious hero who saved the hostages in the square. As he goes down the stairs, the young man sees the report saying that the so-called esper looked like a black pupa. At that moment, he opens the fridge to get something while the association tries to analyze his trail. The TV confirms that the new vigilante has been classified as B level and given the codename Black Pupa. Drinking his beverage, the boy realizes that the world of power users is divided by ranks. Then he observes his sister sitting on the couch, and decides to use his detection technique to check on the girl. The panel explains that he just needs to touch the target to see all their data and special abilities. At that, a dark smoke begins to emerge from behind the boy as he prepares his spying magic. The girl remains distracted by her phone, not noticing that her brother's power is approaching her. Silently, the shadow extends towards the young woman's neck to take a reading, but suddenly, her eyes glow with an intense purple hue, indicating that she felt the presence. At this moment, the hero is paralyzed with shock, noticing that his sister reacted instantly to the touch. With that, she stares at the protagonist with a very sharp look, wanting to know what he was up to. Trying to play it cool, he offers the girl a can of soda with a nervous smile, but she remains suspicious, feeling that a real danger was nearby just a few seconds ago. Drinking his own can, the young man notices that the investigation quest has not yet been marked as complete. He wonders if the system requires seeing her use her powers or if he needs to confirm her Esper class. The data screen reveals that Zimai is actually a first-level exorcist linked to a demon. The boy remembers the three main species the game mentioned during his character creation. He then understands that the final piece of the puzzle is the class of exorcists who act in the shadows. Then the older brother enters the room, commenting that it's rare to see the two of them together in that environment, and with groceries in hand, the man announces that he will be in charge of preparing tonight's special dinner. At that moment, he asks his siblings to wait for the meal before going anywhere. The protagonist notices that his relative seems to have fully recovered despite yesterday's injuries. Then the girl says their father called, saying he will be back home later tonight, but the mood in the room immediately gets heavy when the older brother makes a very serious and cold expression. The young woman sighs worriedly, hoping that the two of them don't start a new fight after so long. Later, the boy checks his phone, seeing how the United Nations classify the danger of espers. The list goes from the harmless class to the dangerous restricted rank, which is at the very top. With this, he sees that the lower classes live as ordinary people and work in normal jobs. In the higher ranks are the elite warriors, who form the main base of the association. Above them are the members of the Rainbow Wing, who represent the pinnacle of public power in this world. Finally, the restricted class has only had one user in history, who was reported as gone by the government. At this, the young man becomes curious, wondering if that secret record actually refers to him. He thinks that his life in the lab was like being gone, and suspects a connection between the places. The hero realizes that fighting against the researchers would be the same as declaring war on the entire world. So he starts to think of a new strategy to gain his freedom without being annihilated. At that moment, he plans to turn his new family into his private combat force for the future. By manipulating the identity of a brother, he intends to use the other two as key pieces in his game. Looking at the mother's photo, he knows that their hatred for the association will facilitate this union. With the help of such powerful allies, the protagonist will have an army capable of facing anyone. Suddenly, the older brother calls him by the nickname Xiaoyu, interrupting his evil thoughts. Holding the knife, the man asks if the boy really spent the whole night inside the house. At this, the sister also joins the conversation, saying she felt his behavior was very strange today. Startled, the boy puts on a surprised face, trying to hide his nervousness in front of his relatives. He claims he went straight to bed after dinner, lying so as not to raise suspicions about the avatar. The man asks if he heard any suspicious noises during the night, but the young man denies it immediately. Finally, the older brother tells him to forget about it and asks him to act as if nothing happened. At this, the boy wonders why the girl is staring at him with such a serious expression. She notices that he is talking too much, as the boy usually just stayed locked in his own room. With that, the girl calls him a lazy pig and complains about him sleeping until 3 in the afternoon. The older brother comments that it's good to see him talking, so he doesn't end up ignoring the family like their father does. While cutting the meat, the man sadly remembers how nice the house was when their mother was alive. At this moment, the hero decides to talk less, so as not to be discovered, since he doesn't understand families. Suddenly, the doorbell rings, interrupting the heavy atmosphere that had formed in the kitchen. The girl runs towards the entrance, saying she's on her way to answer whoever it is. Opening the door, the young woman observes the figure who has just arrived with a surprised expression on her face. She remains silent for a few seconds while staring at the visitor who was standing in front of her. Then she announces that their father has finally returned, revealing the silhouette of a tall, mysterious man. The protagonist observes the newcomer carefully, trying to analyze the aura coming from this new relative. With a deep reddish gaze, the man looks around the room, showing an overwhelming presence. The system generates a new quest, asking him to investigate what this Gu Xuan is hiding. Upon seeing the man's face, the young man realizes that this fellow is the true head of that family. The father walks through the room with a very imposing posture, while the boy observes him from a distance. Noticing that his siblings are distracted, the hero sees the perfect chance to use his technique now. He prepares his dark energy to touch the man and discover all the secrets he holds. But suddenly, the man feels something strange approaching and changes his expression to one of alert. A giant purple serpent emerges from the shadows, revealing the hidden and terrifying power the father possesses. And in an extremely fast move, the man advances to stop the approach of that energy. The hero is in shock as his arm is grabbed tightly, and he realizes he has made a grave mistake. The system confirms that the target is more alert than the sister, but the reading ability has been activated. With a deadly look, the father demands to know the meaning of that gesture as he stares at his son with fury. Sweating nervously, the boy tries to play it cool, saying he just wanted to brush some dust off his shoulder. At that, the man's gaze softens a bit, and he seems to feel guilty for having acted with violence. Letting go of the boy's arm, the man apologizes softly, showing a more human and protective side. He reflects that he lived in constant danger for 2 years, and his nerves have become too sensitive. But the father remains intrigued by that strange sensation he felt coming from his own youngest son. The man describes it as feeling like a snake crawling up his shoulder, with green eyes piercing his mind. The system announces that the mission has been completed and awards skill and stat points as a prize. The main quest is updated, asking the young man to cooperate with a supervillain named Ghost Clock. At that moment, the boy is completely paralyzed upon seeing the image of this legendary criminal. He makes the connection immediately and discovers that his own father is actually the feared masked villain. The data reveals that the man has A+ level strength and creates a shadow clone in a tower. The boy discovers that the villain only attacks corrupt espers, and always demands that the elite be sent after him. With this, he understands that the father is acting as bait to find and destroy his mother's killer. The young man realizes that his brother's method is the opposite of his father's, but they both seek the same goal. Even though they are from the same family, the two have chosen different paths and are now on opposite sides. Annoyed, the older brother confronts his father, asking how they can trust someone who disappeared. He yells that the old man hasn't changed at all and that he never thought about the suffering of his own children. The boy accuses his father of ignoring the family's pain while his sister cried every night. The father hangs his head in silence, seeming to regret having promised he would come home. The blue hero states that the father should live near a casket, since he only cares about those who are gone. In a cold voice, the man asks if his son really thinks he has forgotten what happened. He questions if the young man has already erased his own mother from his memory, making the mood even more tense. At that moment, a spark of pure hatred shines in one of their eyes, indicating that the limit has been reached. Losing his patience, the brother grabs his father by the collar and tells him to shut up right away. The girl watches the fight with great sadness, while the protagonist notices the trail of pain in the family. The blue warrior grits his teeth, showing that the anger is much deeper than it seems. Suddenly, the protagonist steps in, yelling for the two of them to stop that mess at once. The older brother looks surprised at his younger sibling, for being interrupted so directly. The father also stares at the young man with astonishment, seeing the determination shining on the little one's face. With a very serious look, the boy decides to bring order to the house to prevent the worst from happening. Holding his relative's hand, the hero orders him to let go of their father and stop acting like a madman. The scene changes abruptly, showing that the younger sister couldn't take the pressure and ran away from home. The protagonist observes the open door, feeling that the situation has tragically spiraled out of control. With that, he decides he needs to go after the girl to bring her back before something bad happens. The young man observes the city under the night sky and prepares to use his avatar powers again. Standing in a dirty alley, the boy complains that this situation feels like a soap opera drama that he hates. With that, the young man takes the chance to proceed with the next step of his crazy plan. The scene shows the front of the house at night, shrouded in a very mysterious and calm silence. An anonymous message appears on the brother's phone, asking if he suspects his own father. The older brother looks at the text thoughtfully, trying to figure out who sent him that warning. He then replies, asking for the identity of the person sending those strange messages. The anonymous person reveals himself as Black Pupa, leaving the Blue Warrior in a state of pure shock. With that, the man stares at the device, unaware that he is talking to his own younger brother. Near a machine, the hero laughs because he knows that tracing the signal will only lead back to their house. Blue Arc confesses that his father has been acting strange, and the young man decides to wait to reveal the truth. At that moment, the older brother decides to ask one last question to end the mystery. But the boy spits out his soda when he sees his brother asking if he's actually their dad. He is perplexed by the crazy question and wonders how his relative came to that conclusion. Then the Blue Warrior gives up on the pointless chat and asks what the vigilant wants from him. The protagonist focuses his red eyes and decides to maintain control of this very risky negotiation. He warns that if he were an enemy, he would have already exposed everyone's identities to destroy the family. The brother agrees to cooperate for mutual benefit, and the young man tosses the empty can in the trash, satisfied. At that, the system confirms the mission's success and releases points to create a second character. The sister approaches by surprise, wanting to know what worked and making the boy nervous. He gets a huge scare as she says that their father and brother told him to come back soon. The girl looks at him suspiciously, noticing that his behavior has changed from night to day. She says he is different and warns that she doesn't want to go back home, now out of pure rebellion. Sitting on the swing, the girl says that a friend is coming to pick her up in a few minutes. The young man makes a joke about it being her girlfriend and gets a big lecture from his very annoyed sister. Suddenly, a hand touches the hero's shoulder, and he wonders who the woman who appeared there is. A stylish woman appears, hugging the boy while the girl introduces her private tutor. The woman apologizes for the scare, laughing at the exaggerated reaction the protagonist had at that moment. With that, Zimai explains that he is her brother and tells the master not to act like a stranger. The boy is confused, trying to understand what an exorcism teacher is doing there in that square. The woman introduces herself as Kikian and extends her hand to shake the young man's in a friendly manner. Upon shaking her hand, the system automatically activates the data probe on the new character. The panel reveals that she is a level 2 elite exorcist with an extremely rare power. He concludes that despite being strong, she doesn't surpass the 2 natural disasters he has at home. The teacher stares at the boy in silence, feeling a very strange vibration coming from the touch. Then the boy leaves, making his sister furious for being abandoned with the woman there. He analyzes his quests and realizes he has still failed to discover the youngest's real secret. Determined, the young man plans to follow the girl later to understand her persona as an exorcist. Meanwhile, the blonde woman watches the boy walk away, feeling that the handshake was bizarre. The little girl asks what's wrong and calls the teacher Commander, revealing her real rank. The woman comments that her brother seems to be someone out of the ordinary and dangerous to deal with. Confused, the girl just looks at her master not understanding the reason for so much worry now. Kikion observes the dark horizon, sensing that something terrible is about to happen. Suddenly, a monster with a camera for a face appears in the shadows, ready to test the boy. Another creature in the shape of a train appears, laughing loudly and creating an atmosphere of pure nightmare in the square. The commander calls her student to get on her power. Suspicious of the interest in the family, she notices that the girl has no idea that her own brother has esper powers in his body. With a very deep look, the woman decides she won't meddle in others' secrets for now. Lighting a cigarette, she invites the young woman to spend the holidays at her house to relax. The girl complains about her master's habit, but accepts the invitation to escape her father's fights. They talk about a trip to Tokyo while planning to eat something delicious there. In his room, the hero analyzes his C-level attributes and realizes he needs to level up very quickly. So he distributes his points, increasing his strength and agility to C++ level. The system switches to the skill tree, and the young man focuses on the new power branches to use. He observes the paths of cruelty and stealth, ready to unlock containment spells. Thinking about the future, he knows he needs more characters, so he never runs out of attack options. With that, he learns the ability to force the truth and unlocks the next stealth level. The boy suspects that the orphanage staff helped with his abduction years ago, so he swears to make the director pay for everything and tells the old man to start praying as fast as he can. The screen shows the camouflage technique, which allows him to become invisible within his own shadows. The young man spends one more point on stealth and admits that his character is becoming quite overpowered. Finally, he unlocks the chain trap, which pins any enemy's feet to the ground. The boy sees the spell's description, but notices that all his skill points have already been spent. Then the superstar system screen reveals that he needs to cooperate with more people to get bonuses. At that moment, the full division mode is activated, allowing him to control the character all day long. The instructor enters the cell, commenting that he plans to let the young man interact with the other children. At this, the hero is very surprised, questioning if there really are more young people imprisoned there. But the man just drinks his beverage and suggests that he try to make new friends in that place. Then the protagonist asks if they aren't afraid of a mass escape organized by the little ones. At that, the man in the suit smiles ironically, saying they know everyone there very well, except for him. The boy lies down and calls him on his promise about the information on the other species of superhumans. At that moment, the instructor explains that they suspect the boy is an emissary or an exorcist. Suddenly, a new intelligence system is unlocked, increasing the potential of his avatars. The screen then shows the progress of his knowledge about the three main factions of the world. The young man realizes it was a good thing he didn't create the character before, so as not to lose this valuable data. Then the man asks which of the mysterious groups the prisoner wants to hear about first. But as soon as he starts to answer, something bizarre happens, changing the mood of that conversation. At that moment, the boy feels a terrible shock and is paralyzed with an inexplicable agony. With this, he feels as if a nail is piercing his skull, making his brain tremble in pain. The panel announces that he has entered full division mode and will now see everything at the same time. Panting, the hero notices that the caller didn't detect anything, keeping his secret well guarded for now. So he hides his discomfort and asks the visitor to tell him about the anomaly emissaries. The instructor adjusts his glasses and accepts the prisoner's request, beginning to tell an ancient legend. With that, he starts talking about a legendary well called Chicano and what lives in its belly. But the young man interrupts the story, asking him to stop talking as if he were telling fairy tales. The man explains that these people's head out is inside the belly of this giant creature. Then we see the image of the giant well floating in a setting that seems to be from another world. In that place, there is a miniature garden with marine cities and palaces of the royal family. Then the boy asks about the real powers that these so-called emissaries usually use in fights. The visitor explains that each of them gets a codex to locate anomaly domains around. Then we see a warrior carrying a lantern and exploring ruins to get fragments. The boy questions what these anomaly pieces can do that's so special in combat. With that, the instructor says that the fragments are divided into 4 levels, with mythological being the highest. He cites examples of powerful gods like Zeus and Hades, whose remains give divine powers to their owners. Then the protagonist wants to know more about the generations level, which is slightly below that. The man mentions urban legends like Santa Claus and the Titanic, which can be used as brute force. But he emphasizes that a mythological fragment can destroy an entire country in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the hero's knowledge of the group rises to 30%, unlocking bonuses. The boy admits that these beings seem much more dangerous than he ever was. At that, the instructor explains that there is a huge difference between destroying a country and the whole world. The young man sees himself as a walking disaster, while the man assures him they are there to help. So he throws himself on the bed and asks who the group is that is keeping him locked in that dark cell. And with a mysterious smile, the visitor says he cannot reveal that secret to the boy just yet, but the protagonist questions if they aren't part of the official superhuman association. The instructor, with his back turned, states that their work is much nobler and more dangerous than the others. The boy realizes he won't get anything straight from him and decides to focus on other information. At that moment, the man decides to change the subject of the lesson and starts talking about the exorcists now. Suddenly, a warning appears, saying that a calamity, Class Esper, wants to speak with the instructor. The hero gets tense, noticing that the place is full of monsters with completely absurd powers. With that, the visitor ends the chat for today and says he will come back at a better time. Alone, the young man concludes that the preparation phase for his next step is almost finished. The system asks if he wants to spend 3 points to create a new character in the real world for good. At that, a magic die appears in the air and asks the boy to choose a number from 1 to 6 to roll. The boy selects the number 6 and hopes that luck is on his side for this roll. For getting it right, he gets an extra character profile as a bonus for this new creation. Then 3 identity options appear amidst digital blocks, waiting for his choice. The first is a Japanese geisha named Nana, who seeks revenge against her country's mafia. But the hero refuses the woman, finding her story too heavy and full of bad memories. The second option is an emissary named Al Pacino, but his basic attributes are too low. Suddenly, a red danger warning pops up on the screen, startling our protagonist on the spot. Several alert windows start flashing very quickly, indicating that something is going wrong. Finally, the system warns that his mind will be divided into 3 bodies, causing unbearable pain. Dividing focus among 3 paths is difficult, but he needs it to free his original body. With that, the young man's eyes shine intensely as he focuses all his will on the system. At this, the protagonist prepares to manage his new hero in this advanced digital environment. He analyzes the next profile, hoping the basic attributes aren't terrible this time. Suddenly, a rare character notice appears, revealing the Exorcist class to the player. The orange panel loads the information of the third character, who is about to be revealed. With that, 19-year-old Xia Pingzhou appears, with a powerful pact made with a dark demon. At this moment, the boy observes a burning leaf in the air and wonders what that means. The text on the ancient paper mentions the macabre agreement that gives rise to this new warrior's powers. He burns the contract, confirming the choice of this exorcist as his second character in the game. Choosing between 2 evolution paths, the young man prefers to follow the wild hunt route now. At that, the system materializes the new avatar while preparing its logical entry into the real world. The countdown for the login in Tokyo begins, and the protagonist closes his eyes for the journey. The scene changes to the capital of Japan at exactly 7:30 in the morning, with lights in the city. Admiring the famous tower, the boy wonders if he really ended up in the middle of Tokyo this time. With that, the system starts loading Xia's memories so the young man knows how to act there. He feels a sharp pain in his head as he receives all the memories of a life he never lived. He then discovers that the new hero was the sole survivor of a cruel massacre of his former team. Overcome by sadness, he sees that his family was eliminated, and now revenge is his only goal. To find the culprit, he decides to infiltrate a gang of dangerous criminals using the hidden network. And with a sarcastic smile, the protagonist accepts this new grudge that fate has placed in his hands. He walks on water while reviewing that his power comes from 4 magical chess pieces. The king, the queen, the pawn, and the rook float around him, ready to obey his every command. He then learns that each exorcist possesses a unique weapon fused with the soul of a real demon. Being a monster hunter, the boy notes that his power level is one of the rarest in the world. He analyzes his own hand, realizing that this new combat character covers all his flaws. Without wasting time, the hero opens the skill tree to plan his evolution in this new world. The 3 branches show summoning and hunting powers that cost points to be learned. He notes that he can evolve his pieces from iron to bronze level, increasing all their attributes. Walking through the streets, he concludes that his combat strategy will now be focused on summons. Suddenly, his cell phone emits a notification sound, catching his attention in the middle of the sidewalk. An anonymous message schedules a meeting in an underground bar in the 3rd room of a building. The young man is sure that this invitation came from the White Crow Troop and prepares for the meeting. Looking at the power polls, he knows that the time to act and start his plan has truly come. Entering the bar, he sees several people partying early in the day and is surprised by so much energy. Stopping in front of door number 03, the boy knows that inside are criminals wanted by the elite. He holds the doorknob, hoping his character will hold up until he creates the next warrior. At that, the boy turns the knob, entering the room where real danger silently awaits him. With a doubtful look, he observes who is inside and is surprised by what he sees. A beautiful young woman wearing a red kimono and flowers in her hair now faces our protagonist. Her eyes shine with sinister red spirals, showing that she is no ordinary young woman. Both remain silent, sizing each other up as tension fills the small room. In a calm tone of voice, the girl asks if he is the newcomer the group was expecting. The boy confirms that he came to join the troop, keeping his identity as Shisha well protected there. They stand side by side as the young man realizes her power level is quite high. Entering the room, he sees 2 men on the couch and discovers that the boss wants to test his skills. The blonde fellow introduces himself as Alan's, being number 11, and holds some cards in his hand. A man with a pixelated head says his name is Robert, but everyone knows him by the nickname Radish. The woman in the kimono remains silent, just observing the interaction between the new companions. There, suddenly, she begins to manipulate several sheets of paper that float nimbly around her body. The sharp pieces cut through the air like blades, revealing the deadly nature of this girl's magic. She moves elegantly among the floating papers, showing total control over her ability. The protagonist is intrigued by this power and prepares to take the number 12 position in the gang. Allens looks at his wristwatch, announcing that the time for introductions is over for now. Playing cards fall onto the table, indicating they have a dirty job to do on their way out. The blonde man smiles, saying the order is to eliminate everyone in the bar so they don't interfere with the future auction. The young man wonders if his initiation test will really be to end everyone's life there. At that moment, a casino robot appears behind the blonde man as he adjusts his black tie. Very curious, the boy tries to understand how this new alley's luck ability works. The robot pulls the machine's lever to try and facilitate the massacre that is about to begin. With that, the casino robot begins to vibrate intensely, ready to release its result. Then the machine's screen reveals 3 missiles, indicating that the effect will be very explosive this time. The man in the suit smiles, saying the result was a bit too flashy for the moment. Suddenly, a glowing portal appears on the wall, and the alley tells the newcomer to hurry up. The young man is intrigued, wondering if that is a very advanced teleportation ability. At that, the girl warns that they will be torn to pieces if they don't leave that bar right now. So Allens pushes the boy into the light, assuring him that their destination will be very fun. The protagonist questions if they shouldn't have eliminated everyone who was at the location first. With a very mysterious look, the blonde man just keeps his smile without answering anything directly. At that moment, he reveals that the targets are already down as the bar violently explodes behind them. Suddenly, the luck robot begins to shatter around the hero in a very strange way. A blinding glow emanates from the machine as it undergoes a total and dangerous transformation. With that, several pieces fly through the air, shrouded in electricity. As the magic completes itself, the small robot then transforms into a huge technological rocket, ready for the final impact. The young man calmly observes everything, finally understanding how his new partner's power works. The massive explosion consumes the entire building, and the system announces that no one there survived. Looking at the flames, the hero notices that even the neighboring areas were hit by that brutal attack. Very seriously, the boy asks what the next step of this heavy initiation test will be. Then the group arrives at an abandoned office building, where the atmosphere is one of pure mystery. Alan explains that this location is in the Minato district and holds very dark secrets there. Signs on the wall tell employees not to waste time, as work is a battlefield. The young man feels a heavy energy of exhaustion in the air and questions why they came there. With that, a monstrous creature appears behind the blonde man, revealing the true challenge of the night. Surprised, the protagonist asks if that thing in front of him is really a real demon. The man warns that the three of them will just watch while the newcomer fights the disgusting beast. He makes a sign with his fingers, warning that if the performance is poor, the application will be denied. At this, the blonde man leans in and threatens to take the boy's life right there if he fails the mission. In a mocking tone, he says the opponent has arrived and tells the boy to give him a welcome. The system displays the main objective of passing the test, and the young man decides to accept this challenge. Adjusting his coat collar, the hero prepares for combat, maintaining a very confident posture. The monster starts screaming desperately, asking for a break while facing its new enemy. The giant creature in a business suit holds a keyboard and a coffee, yelling about impossible goals. Alan introduces the opponent as the demon of slave labor, while observing from the top of the room. He explains that this anomaly was born from the accumulated resentment of employees who perished there. The girl in the kimono finds the story exaggerated, but the blonde man admits he just wanted to say something cool. The boy is perplexed, questioning what the workers did to suffer so much. At that moment, the multi-headed monster roars again with all its might, focused only on the attack. The protagonist activates his chess magic, summoning his pieces to surround the brutal enemy. Consumed by fury, the demon attacks with its desk, shouting for a non-existent pay raise. Holding the king piece, the young man remembers the teachings on how to use this power correctly. With that, the object glows and shatters, releasing a protective energy around the fighter. The monster lands a devastating blow, trying to crush the hero with all its weight and hatred. A cloud of dust rises with the impact, as the floor completely cracks under the creature. The beast stares at the point of impact, asking grimly if it will have to work overtime there. But the boy emerges unharmed, and with a mocking smile, saying he has finally figured out the trick. The manifestation of the king appears behind him, granting total immunity against any type of attack. Alan watches the scene, fascinated by the unique ability the new member has just shown. The woman admits she has never seen such a peculiar power and pays close attention to the battle's unfolding. The man with the pixelated head agrees, saying he now understands the boss's interest in the newcomer. Annoyed, the demon advances again, yelling about overwork while trying to strike. Another heavy attack hits the magic barrier, causing an explosion of sparks all over the place. The young man remains standing calmly, stating that no effort will be able to hit him. From above, the veterans comment that this defensive technique is really very useful in combat. The King's Spectre faces the monster head on as the protective aura shines intensely. Desperate, the enemy throws its coffee and attacks with the keyboard, wanting to finish the job quickly, but the absolute defense blocks every damage attempt. keeping our hero completely safe. Realizing he needs to counterattack, the boy pulls out the pawn piece to start his own offensive. The system confirms the summoning of a soldier who, although simple, is lethal in a group. A dark knight with glowing eyes emerges from the depths, ready to tear the demon apart. The creature screams once more as the new warrior advances to deliver a precise blow. With that, the dark pawn unleashes a sequence of quick cuts against the giant monster's body. At this, the beast roars desperately because of the overtime hours while facing its small aggressor. Suddenly, several explosions of black energy hit the enemy, causing immense damage to the place. The hero observes with satisfaction, noting that just one pawn already has a very impressive tactical value. At that moment, he summons the Rook, which appears as a powerful cannon capable of firing destructive shots. A devastating beam of light is fired by the new piece, illuminating the entire office with its energy. The demon is hit head-on by the massive impact, being thrown far away with no chance of defense. With that, a huge curtain of smoke and fire takes over the room, marking the end of that brutal attack. Panting, the monster groans in pain with its clothes torn, feeling the weight of the wounds on its body. Then the boy smiles and prepares his final move, holding the queen piece with great confidence now. At this, the queen appears as the most agile piece on the board, wielding deadly daggers for direct combat. The warrior's purple gaze is cold and calculating, showing that she is ready to finish the job. With a swift movement, she advances towards the target, looking like a white blur cutting through the room's air. Desperate, the enemy tries an aggressive punch, but he can barely keep up with the opponent's speed. The queen dodges perfectly, sliding on the floor while preparing her final blow against the beast. The demon roars in rage upon realizing that its brute force is nothing against the agility of that piece. At that moment, the assassin positions herself with her sharp blade, ready to deliver a fatal cut. With that, she annihilates the sea-level monster, updating the main hunting quest for our hero. The creature's head begins to slowly disintegrate as its final laments echo through the void. The young man reflects on the queen's fighting style, remembering that pawns can be promoted in chess. He then turns to the veterans and asks if he now has the qualifications to join the gang. Alan's votes in favor, finding the ability fun, and the girl agrees because it's a very interesting power. But the pixelated man hesitates, saying the boy is still weak and will probably perish if he stays there. With that, the blonde man puts his hand on his colleague's shoulder, suggesting he can still vote against the entry. But he smiles sinisterly, saying that if the newcomer fails, he will simply have to be taken out.